Thanks, Jane. Pretty hard act to follow that one, so I'll perhaps wind down to the micro scale to start with. Heard a bit about my introduction. When I first came to Queensland in '95, I was employed on a program called the Regional Open Space System to increase the area of public open space in southeast Queensland. Now, I've been telling this story for over 20 years. Most people actually don't believe me or haven't heard the story. But when I arrived, it was an initiative of the Goss government to increase the area of open space in southeast Queensland by about 8%. The reason being that compared to Sydney, and if you take our southeast Queensland region, Noosa to Coolangatta and out to Toowoomba, and if you put that over Sydney, it'd be about Newcastle, Wollongong, Lithgow. Get the picture? In southeast Queensland, we have about 17% of that area as public open space, being national parks or state forests, broadly. In Sydney, it's about 49%. We are not in the race against any other capital city in terms of the area of open space in the region, which is, at that stage, was the fastest growing, is still a fairly fast growing region. I think 1,400 people a week or something, the projections are. So we're not in the race compared to other capital cities. And if you look at we need to be buying about 20,000 hectares a year since 2000 to even stand still. So we've got a massive increasing population on a static open space network. People might say, well, does it matter? Well, perhaps in terms of people's use, it may not matter that much. We can crowd more people into a national park. You know, is there a carrying capacity? There probably is, but you can squeeze them in. But broadly, you need about 30% of a region to sustain the ecological function. So we're not even near that. We're about 2/3 of that area. So on both fronts, the Goss government, Wayne Goss was particularly keen to actually increase the area of open space in the fastest growing region at this time in Australia. We didn't achieve much, and we haven't achieved anything since about 2000. You would think, in face with that infrastructure problem, in a sense, the last regional plan, which is Shaping SEQ, which was only approved last year, would at least have identified that as a problem. But they fixed the problem of lack of open space in southeast Queensland by not really mentioning it. So the problem goes away. But I moved to, the other one was just a little fact you might be interested in is that Brisbane well served with a park network. Brisbane itself has the least area of parks within 5 kilometres of the town hall of any capital city in Australia, including Hobart. So we're not in the race in the city sense, we're certainly not in the race regionally. Gets a little bit worse actually, I won't bore you with too much other than southeast Queensland, or Queensland's the only capital city that uses its water catchment areas for public recreation. You cannot access the Warragamba Dam for camping and bushwalking, but you can have a speedboat in the water supply systems for Brisbane. That is a highly risky activity, and we've seen some problems with water supply, but that's one of the reasons we have that access is because of the dearth of access to the broader open space network. This doesn't exist in southeast Queensland. Having come to work on that program, we went through a couple of governments, you might remember, in the early 90s, and I merged eventually to work on regional planning in southeast Queensland. In 2004, with the new statutory regional plan, I was involved in the Office for Urban Management, and up to 2012, when myself and my whole team of planners, non-urban planners, were numenised in September 2012, which wiped out the capacity, in my view, others might disagree, to do non-urban planning in southeast Queensland. Gone. Now, as a retired person, I didn't particularly mind myself being numenised. It was quite, they paid me out quite handsomely. The rest of my team didn't survive so well. But I was walking my dog down at where the boats go out to Stradbroke Island, the Toondah Harbour area, and we were getting wind of a major development at Toondah Harbour. At that stage, it was proposed to be on the land. After the community objected to that, the land happened to be a parkland, by the way. So that the development was moved out on the water initially, The break-even point, we're told, was 800 apartments to be constructed in the water. Sometime in 2015 or 14-15, we're not really sure, the current government increased the urban footprint from 800 units to 3,600 apartments. These apartments are to be located out in the water. On landfill, the land to be reclaimed, and before they build anything, lifted up 3.4 metres above sea level, for obvious reasons. This is a massive dislocation of this area, and in the planning process, of course, the planning for the PDA, the Priority Development Area, which is the new initiative of the then LNP government, sustained, although initially opposed by the incoming Labor government. It wiped away this Redlands City planning scheme, which had been consulted with, etc. It ignored the urban footprint of the much vaunted regional plan. It ignored the Ramsar Convention this land is actually part of, that the land was, Moreton Bay was made a Ramsar area in, I think, 1996. It ignores the fact that it's a marine park, which is effectively a national park. It's got the first national park, I think, in Queensland to be revoked for urban purposes. It ignores the international bird agreements with China, Japan and South Korea. It effectively alienates seabed for the first time for a commercial purpose of this nature. Not unique, but still a process which should have gone through public consultation. It ignored, obviously, the City Council's community plan. And going back to my first point, it wipes out, it's the largest revocation of public green space since at least 1995 in southeast Queensland. Now, the touted benefits of this are all just rhetoric, cliches and rhetoric. Jobs, 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 putting Redlands on the map and making Redlands open for business. The planning documents themselves that led to this PDA and the draft development scheme, which is like a mini planning scheme, did not even mention Ramsar. So the planning document that my colleagues had written failed to mention Ramsar. They did mention the marine park, which was a bit of a concession, but for technical reasons and not for planning purposes. So the documents and strategies that were referred to earlier, which supposedly provided the protection, have been done away with by the announcement of a PDA, Priority Development Area, which was at the request of the Redlands City Council to the state government to effectively take over the planning powers of the council, which is the planning powers of the community. So they were given up without any public consultation to the state government. And since then, since 2014, we've been on this treadmill of put this development in place for the benefit of a major developer, a $1.4 billion development. Now, if you could see the public benefit, if we could see the real costs, if we could see what we could get out of this development, there may be a reason that the community might go along with it. But that detail is hidden behind commercial in confidence agreements, which we understand individual councillors have signed off on individually with the developer. My proposition on that one is that if you've signed a secrecy agreement, how can you continue to make decisions in the public interest? Where do you stand? We haven't yet put that one forward as an issue for various reasons, but just conceptually at least, if you've entered a secrecy agreement with a developer, how can you then continue to pretend to make decisions in the public interest? I'll just move, one proposition that's been put forward is the council will get $100 million of community benefit out of this project. Now, that's the cost, they believe, of upgrading the port. Now, recently the upgraded port out to Rottnest Island was announced, and that's $33 million, well short of the $100 million. The new international port at Luggage Point is estimated to cost about $160 million. They're going to bring in boats of 4,000 people into Luggage Point. We're talking about ferries with 200 or 300 people out of Moreton, out of Toondah Harbour. So the it seems to me, on this basis, that the question I've been asked to address was a bit quality of life versus economic return. Well, in the Toondah Harbour development, there's no doubt in my mind that quality of life has been trumped by the economic return. Just move quickly to planning schemes, though. Our Redlands planning scheme in its last iteration, the community generated about 5,000 submissions, which is 10 times the background rate, I like that term, that the Gold Coast achieved. So we have 10 times as many people participating in planning in Redlands on the planning scheme. Those 5,000 submissions were touted by the Mayor at the time as being a significant contribution to the planning and, sort of claiming the participation was high and she deserves stars for that effort. Those 5,000 submissions made effectively no difference to the planning scheme. No difference to the draft planning scheme. So in the case of the Redlands planning scheme, the quality of life certainly was trumped by the economic return. In regional planning, the much touted SEQ plan, I just would like to be careful with the words, you probably need to read it yourself. This is the foreword by our Deputy Premier, Jackie Trad. Shaping SEQ sets a framework for our growth. It's all premised on growth, by the way. There's no suggestion you should actually question that. So that we can maintain everything that makes living in South East Queensland great while taking advantage of the opportunities of the fastest growing economic region in the world, the Asia Pacific region. At the same time, it will help manage potential impacts of population growth to deliver housing supply and affordable living, support planning and delivery of critical infrastructure while protecting our natural environment and lifestyle. So it's all in all, everything is good in planning in this sort of document. It doesn't stand up to any sort of analysis on the words, never mind the actual impacts. The investment in terms of delivery of the outcomes for this plan are all tied to giving certainty to the development industry, and it does that fairly well. So on the preliminary thing you got, I was mentioned as a town planner. I do not claim to be a town planner in this environment. I'd rather claim to be a surveyor, because I think it's a more credible profession. And so I will leave it there, but I think sorry, I have another quote, just to put, this is a bit out of context, but it relates to the revision of the Planning Act by the former Minister for Planning. And he said, community and industry participation is necessary to ensure success in reforming the planning regime in Queensland. No one would disagree. The external stakeholders invited to participate in planning forums on the Planning Act were the Urban Development Institute of Australia, the Property Council of Australia, the Planning Institute of Australia, and the construction sector. I could go on with various other examples of that, but you get my gist, and perhaps we'll move on. Thanks, Jane.